The 4th of July revelation. The memory of the 4th of July celebration will always stick in my mind as a disastrous holiday. We men are often taught to endure mistreatment, love without conditions, and take the high road when things go awry in our relationships with women. But this incident crossed a line for me. It shattered something within me because I truly loved my wife, Emma. I cried. There have only been a few instances in my life that brought tears to my eyes, mostly related to loss, but this pain was different. Let's dive into the story. Although I apologize if I don't follow the usual narrative structure, this is more of a therapeutic outlet for me, and healing takes time. I've been married to Emma for 4 years now. We're still relatively new to marriage, but we dated for 2 years before tying. Our relationship appeared strong, with no signs of trouble. Our love was genuine, and we built a foundation of trust during our courtship. I'm 30 years old, and she's 26. The incident that brought Emma's cheating to light occurred on July 4th during a party organized by her friend, Sophia. Let me give you a bit of context before delving into the incident itself. About a week before July 4th, Emma had mentioned that her close friend wanted us to join her July 4th celebration. We usually have a reliable babysitter for our 3-year-old, and we usually inform the sitter in advance about our babysitting needs. Leading up to this specific 4th of July event, Emma informed me that she had contacted the babysitter, who mentioned her schedule would be packed, and she couldn't make it. I was a bit disappointed because spending time with Emma had become rarer since we had our child. Emma expressed her strong desire to attend the event and suggested that I stay home with our child while she goes to Sophia's party. I wanted her to have fun, so I agreed and said I'd take care of our child at home. Now, here's the twist. Emma knew I wasn't exactly a big fan of Sophia. Sophia is still single, and while Emma is 26 years old, Sophia is 3 years younger and a bit more carefree. I don't want to come across as controlling, especially since Emma is an adult. I simply advised her to watch out for Sophia because she might not be the best influence. On the morning of July 4th, I took an unusual step and decided to call the babysitter myself. Normally, Emma handles these arrangements, and I had to find the sitter's number on Emma's phone. My thinking was that if I offered the babysitter a higher hourly rate, she might change her mind and agree to take care of my child that evening. If it works out, I planned to surprise Emma and let her know we could go to the event together after all. I wanted to share the news with her once I had the babysitter situation sorted out and enjoy the satisfaction of pulling off a last-minute miracle. Things started to unravel when I called the babysitter and asked her to reconsider sitting for my son that evening, even though she had initially declined. She appeared surprised when I used the word reconsider and told me it was the first time I had asked her about that day. Her surprise caught me off guard, too, and I inquired if she remembered Emma calling her to arrange the evening a week earlier. She confirmed she hadn't received any call from Emma. I quickly improvised and told her that Emma had actually called a family member instead. That's when it became clear to me that Emma had lied for some reason, although I couldn't figure out why. It was definitely a cause for concern. I arranged for the sitter to come to our house at 10 p.m., and Emma mentioned she would be leaving around 8 p.m. for the event. Before ending the call with the sitter, I made sure to tell her not to inform Emma about her coming over. I explained that I wanted to surprise Emma and keep the outing I had planned a secret. I almost stumbled over my words when the sitter reminded me that I had mentioned Emma's earlier attempt to secure the date and time. I managed to cover it up by saying that we both thought the date night might have been canceled, but since she was on board, it would still be a nice surprise. As scheduled, Emma left around 8 p.m. I waited patiently for the sitter, who arrived on time. Once she was there, I headed to the party Emma had mentioned. Honestly, I had a suspicion that she might not show up and go somewhere else instead. But to my surprise, she was indeed at the party. Sophia greeted me as I arrived. Seeing me there surprised her, and she quickly called Emma over. It's an understatement to say she was just shocked. Her reaction was more like utter disbelief. It had only been around 3 hours since Emma left home, but she already seemed quite intoxicated. Her eyes were bloodshot, and her reception toward me was chilly. She repeatedly asked why I was there and who was taking care of our child. I reassured her that I had the babysitter situation under control and that she shouldn't worry. I just wanted us to enjoy the evening together and watch the fireworks display. The party itself was in a medium-sized setting, with maybe 15 to 20 people squeezed into the house. One thing that stood out to me, though, was the gender ratio. There were noticeably more guys than girls, almost like a 2-to-1 ratio. We managed to move past the awkward initial interaction, but that still didn't explain why Emma had been deceptive about the outing. The event seemed to revolve around a game night, with a focus on playing risky truth or dare games. I overheard one of the guys suggesting they get back to the game. I decided it was time to catch up on what I had missed and joined in with the friendly group of guys. These were the ones who were quite talkative, either due to the drinks flowing or just their outgoing personalities. Amidst the gathering, Emma's behavior became agitated and uneasy, and she expressed her desire to leave and go home. Her sudden request to leave raised a red flag for me, suggesting that she was definitely hiding something. I assured her we could head home, but I asked for a moment to try some of the drinks since I had just arrived. I headed to the kitchen and struck up a conversation with one of the guys there. After introducing myself to a random guy, I inquired if he was enjoying the party. He introduced himself as Alex and confirmed that he was indeed having a good time. I told him I was interested in making a move on one of the girls at the party but wasn't sure who was available. I began pointing to the different girls one by one, and he helped me identify who was already in a relationship and who seemed open to approach. Using this approach, I eventually pointed to Emma without revealing her identity to Alex. I then asked him what he thought about her. He mentioned that Emma was attractive but warned me that she was off limits because she arrived with a guy he knew as a friend. I pretended to be interested and asked him to share more details about this guy. Alex went on to give me information about Emma's affair partner, explaining that they had met at a concert and had been involved with each other intimately since then. This revelation hit me hard. The timeline of when Emma attended the concert and met this guy matched up perfectly. This struck a chord because I was also present at that very same concert. What bothered me was the fact that I was with her most of the time during the event, except when she wanted to get some snacks and insisted on going alone. I recall that it took her an unusually long time to return with her snacks, but I brushed it off assuming there was a long line or she needed to use the restroom. This incident happened about a month prior, and ever since then, she had been frequently leaving the house and even had a trip out of town. This new information left me questioning everything. Alex was bragging about Emma as if she were some kind of prize he'd won for his friend. He kept on talking, sharing a few more details. He explained that he had come to the party to pursue Sophia, whom he described as a free spirit. I wasn't sure if my reaction was noticeable, but I couldn't fake it anymore. Just then, Sophia joined the conversation, possibly realizing that my questions were leading to the truth about Emma's affair. However, it was too late and I could tell that she was also part of the deception. I excused myself from the conversation but asked Sophia about Emma's whereabouts. She suggested checking the patio, and that's where I found Emma talking to the guy. It seemed like they were either having a heated discussion or she was trying to convince him of something. I approached them and introduced myself to the man who was involved with Emma. But before I could say anything to him, Emma hastily pulled me away, insisting that we should leave the party. I swatted her hand away with anger and told her she could leave because I wanted to have a talk with the man. I confronted him directly, introducing myself as her husband. I asked him straightforwardly if he knew Emma was married before getting involved with her. Considering I had already discovered the truth about their relationship, I have a somewhat imposing presence that I use to my advantage in confrontations. Honestly, I wasn't looking to fight him if he genuinely didn't know she was married. My little show of subtle aggression was meant to let Emma know that I had uncovered her infidelity and to unsettle the guy a bit. I repeated my question to him, making it clear that I didn't want to ruin the party by starting a brawl, but I needed to know if he was aware of Emma's marital status before getting involved with her. Emma was getting anxious and tried to hold me back while apologizing. The guy, seeing the bottle in my hand and realizing he was cornered on the patio with no support, fell for my act and started apologizing as well. He mentioned that he didn't intend to cause any trouble and that he had only started talking to Emma without knowing she was married. I inquired about the number of times they had been together, and he gave a response. I simply wished him a good night and walked away. I hopped in my car and drove back home. I told Emma that I wanted a divorce. I checked into a hotel where I'm writing down my story as a form of self-therapy. I'm feeling lost about what steps to take. This is my first experience with divorce, and I'm completely unfamiliar with co-parenting since I didn't grow up in a household like that. What I do know is that I can't bear the thought of seeing that woman, and this incident is making me physically sick. I'll probably provide updates on what my next moves will be, but for now, I'm truly uncertain. Story 2. The high school reunion disaster. My wife, Laura, and I were 35 and 36 years old, respectively, when we got wind of an upcoming high school reunion. We lined up a babysitter for the night and were genuinely looking forward to it. I might not have known any of her old classmates, but the idea of mingling with her friends from back then was thrilling. I first crossed paths with Laura in a bar situated on the same street where we both worked. She was a hairdresser and I was employed at a print shop. The first thing that caught my eye was her stunning hair, and then I glimpsed her eyes, and I knew right then that she was going to captivate me for a long time to come. Her opening line to me was about needing a haircut, but that's a tangent. We tied the knot and welcomed 2 children into our lives. Our marriage had its imperfections, and there were instances when we thought about taking some time apart, but whenever it came to actually packing our bags, neither of us could go through with it. There was no cheating going on at that point, so it felt like every disagreement or issue could be resolved with communication and effort. Isn't that how marriages are meant to work? Our kids enjoyed a wholesome childhood, never having to overhear heated arguments. They were 13 and 16 when we began preparing to attend her high school reunion. About 2 weeks before the reunion, Laura went on a Facebook spree, adding a bunch of her high school buddies. Among them were a few guys, although most of them were also married. I didn't suspect anything fishy until the sound of constant dings filled the air throughout our time at home together. Her phone was constantly chiming. I swear I even heard it while I was in the shower or on the toilet. It went off while she was cooking dinner and even when we were saying goodnight to the kids. The excessive notifications were becoming a bit too conspicuous, and she knew it. So, I finally mustered up the courage to ask her who was texting her so incessantly. Her response: it was just old high school friends catching up. Fair enough. She switched her phone to vibrate mode, and suddenly the messages seemed to stop. But one night after she had fallen asleep, I heard that faint buzzing sound again. I stared at the ceiling for a good half hour before I caved in. What I read in those messages was unsettling. It was a back and forth between her and one of the guys who would be at the reunion. In one message, she mentioned how excited she was to see him again and how wonderful it would be. In another, she questioned whether he had changed over the years compared to when they were young. He replied that, unfortunately, he could only have that kind of fun with her. She responded by saying they might have some fun at the reunion or afterward. He then pointed out that it seemed like she wanted to keep seeing him even after the reunion, and she didn't deny it. Well, I decided to have a serious talk with her about it, and she was quick to offer a heartfelt apology. She explained that he seemed lonely and in need of friends. I wasn't having any of it, though, and I made it clear that this wasn't an excuse for their discussions about having fun or continuing their interactions after the reunion. I went further and inquired about whether they had ever been physically intimate in the past, to which she denied. She didn't appear to be lying back then, but now that I know what I do, I'd say she was definitely not telling the truth. She asked if we could still attend the reunion, and I cautiously agreed, thinking that she hadn't entirely broken my trust at that point. I figured I'd be there to keep a close eye on everything. Little did I realize, she kept on conversing with that man, perhaps even more than before. She made sure to get her hair and nails done before the big night out. During that eventful night, the man took a few minutes to muster the courage to reintroduce himself to my wife, all while I stood by her side. The vibe I got from him was uneasy, like he could hardly look me in the eyes, and I could tell he was desperate to reconnect with my wife. She returned his gaze, but there was an added layer of care about me. She introduced me in a friendly manner, but he wasn't fazed. He managed to position himself close enough to keep the conversation going with her throughout the evening. Everyone was indulging in drinks except for me. By the time I needed to use the bathroom, my wife was visibly drunk. I let her know I'd be back in a jiffy, but when I returned, both she and he were nowhere to be found. I looked around and asked one of the women from the reunion where they had gone. She mentioned they had stepped outside for a cigarette. Now, my wife wasn't a smoker, but I speculated that she might have gone out to keep him company. I stepped outside, scanning the area, but they were nowhere in sight. I even checked the interiors of all the cars in the parking lot. When I called her cell phone, she didn't pick up. I was both baffled and frustrated. I waited around for 45 minutes until I finally received a text message from her. It said she had gone along with the man to the nearby gas station, but since they were close to our house, he planned to drop her off there. I knew she was feeding me a load of crap. I got home about 30 minutes later to find that the babysitter had left, and our kids were sound asleep. My wife was on the couch in just her underwear, also asleep. I woke her up right away and demanded an explanation. She seemed really out of it, but deep down, a part of me suspected she might be pretending. She mumbled something incomprehensible, attempting to explain that he had offered her a ride home because he wanted to talk about his own troubles. It was impossible to get any coherent information from her in that state, so I decided to wait until the morning to try and make sense of things. Before my wife woke up, our teenagers filled me in on their evening with the babysitter. I could barely concentrate, but it was a relief that they were already asleep when she got home, so they didn't witness anything unusual. Once my wife was awake, I wasted no time and questioned her about the events. She griped about her fuzzy memory and expressed strong regret. Regret for leaving me there and for getting so intoxicated. Really sorry. After a few hours, she had an emotional breakdown and confessed that she had remembered what actually transpired. It seemed like she somehow sensed that I would discover the truth. She disclosed that he had asked her to step outside and talk, and she agreed. He suggested they get into his car because it was chilly, and she didn't perceive any harm in that. Then she revealed that he had coerced her into kissing and having closeness. Tears streamed down her face, though I suspected it was more due to being caught. I insisted on checking her phone, and she hesitated and tried to make excuses. I snatched the phone from her and retreated to the bathroom to examine it, and guess what? She had found the time to message the man and admit that their actions were a mistake. But even before that, messages from days before the reunion showed they had plotted to sneak away at some point, engage in physical activity, and even contemplated the possibility of her spending the night at his place. This was the final straw. Our marriage had reached its end. As I swung open the bathroom door, she stood there pale as a ghost, staring at me like her entire existence was on the line. I let her know in no uncertain terms that it was over, that I couldn't continue with her after finding out about her calculated betrayal. Her tears flowed, and she begged for my forgiveness in a barely audible voice. I reminded her that even though she was intoxicated when it happened, she had planned this affair in advance. She had chosen to shatter the trust we had built over all those years. My resolve to shield her as my wife crumbled because she had willingly let another man into our life. I didn't think she could feel any lower, but my words managed to drag her further down. She curled up into a ball, her sobs echoing through the room while I went about doing her a few favors. I arranged for the kids to spend the night at their friend's place, hoping to shield them from the traumatic events. I collected as many of my wife's belongings as I could, neatly packing them away. I called her parents and explained the situation, suggesting they come and take their daughter back home. And they did just that. Despite her resistance or inability, I helped her into their car along with her belongings. Her parents attempted to apologize and engage in conversation, but I barely acknowledged them, offering nothing more than a greeting and farewell. My wife made a few attempts to step out of the car, but they warned her that if she didn't leave with them right then, they wouldn't provide her a place to stay until she found an alternative arrangement. The weight of their words sent her into a daze. She understood that her life as she knew it had come crashing down. She remained motionless, resembling a statue as they drove her away. During the divorce and custody hearings, she kept her tears as quiet as she could. Our teenagers opted to live with me, staying in the same house and going to the same school. To her credit, she owned up to her mistakes and tried her best to co-parent with me. Now that several years have gone by, we're at a point where we can at least be friendly. I'm grateful every day that I didn't force myself to stay with her and attempt to mend things. Could have been a lot more painful for me and probably easier for her. She made her choices and I willingly followed a different path. She struggled with it at every step, but perhaps that's what she deserved. Despite moving out multiple times, she's still living with her parents, unable to find stability since this all unfolded. I, on the other hand, got remarried about a year ago, and my new wife is remarkable and trustworthy so far. Sharing my experience is important to give hope to others grappling with their own harrowing life changes. Story 3. Betrayed by my best friend. My child's mother, Lisa, betrayed me by having an affair with my best friend, David. Back when we were just dating, I had no clue that she was meeting up with David at 5 in the morning to hit the gym. After my work shifts in the afternoon, David and I would work out together. Interestingly, she would sometimes show up there unexpectedly and focus on me, barely acknowledging David. Whenever we hung out with friends at restaurants or bars, she'd shower me with attention and affection in front of everyone, sticking close to me. However, if I got up to order a drink or use the restroom, I'd return to find them deep in conversation, and they'd immediately change their behavior when I approached. Since my sister accused me of dominating conversations, I figured I was being overbearing and not giving them space to talk. So whenever I noticed this, I simply trusted them both completely. They both shared an interest in astrology and were thrilled that their zodiac signs matched as Virgos. Eventually, I grew uncomfortable with the direction the relationship was taking, so I decided to end it. Lisa was persistent about us getting back together, putting in a lot of effort. She'd come over to my apartment after my work shifts, trying to seduce me. She'd be dressed in sexy lingerie and wouldn't leave until she satisfied me. However, things took a strange turn with my friends. David started avoiding hanging out, and I noticed the rest of the group excluding me from their plans. I asked David what was going on, why I wasn't being invited anymore, and he'd say it was all last-minute planning, and they assumed I'd be busy. Later on, another friend revealed that he would tell the group he wanted to invite me, but then tell them I was too busy to join. He never reached out to me. Instead, he contacted Lisa and invited her. Lisa was excited to go drinking and clubbing with the group and David. Every time David excluded me from events, he could invite Lisa as his date in the group. Despite all the ongoing drama for months, she was putting in a lot of effort to get us to date again, doing all she could, and he was just enjoying the ride for now. I'll admit I'm not the strongest guy, and despite all the headaches she brought, I'd still fall for her visits because I knew she was up for some fun. Eventually, I wisened up and realized her constant presence was just giving me temporary satisfaction while preventing me from meeting new girls. I took a trip out of town for a few months to break the toxic cycle, but after a whole summer, I figured out that I genuinely enjoyed her company and should be open to compromises. We had been together for 2.5 years, so we already knew each other well. After months of not talking, I approached her and asked if we could start anew. She was really upset, somehow knowing that I had been dating someone else while we were broken up. I had no idea how she found out. At this point, I still didn't know that she and David were hanging out the whole time. I made sure to keep my personal matters private to avoid disrupting my life in case this new attempt didn't work out. However, she oddly guessed many things about me with surprising accuracy. I was eventually compelled to admit, yeah, that actually happened. Sure, I did talk to another girl, and a lot of other things she just wouldn't let go of. After she relentlessly pushed me and insisted that honesty was crucial for this to succeed, I ended up spilling all my private details, even though we were already broken up. Following this, she took it a step further, saying that simply sharing wasn't enough and that if I truly meant it, I had to marry her right then and there or make her pregnant that night. She caught me off guard by suggesting we elope, even proposing that we could get someone she knew as a witness and use a quick venue. I did want to reconcile, but both options felt extremely rushed. I thought that maybe if we had intimacy, I could avoid getting her pregnant, just like it had always been the case. So, within a week, I chose to engage in unprotected intimacy with her as an alternative to getting married, and that's how things unfolded. After that, everything started to go downhill. Firstly, she was against taking a pregnancy test. We had a bunch of extra pregnancy tests, and even though I knew it was too early, I jokingly suggested that she pee on one of them. She came up with a ton of excuses for not doing it until a month later. I sometimes wonder if she was worried she might already be pregnant. On another note, once David learned that I was taking my relationship with Lisa more seriously, he got upset with me and started giving me reasons why I should consider dating someone else instead. Then we found out that she was pregnant from that night, and she gave me an ultimatum. But overall, things seemed good, and I was happy with how they were going. However, her sister started asking me strange questions like, "Why are you so nice to her?" And "Why are you still with her?" Her family seemed surprised that I was continuing to date her. That's when I started noticing red flags. Her sister began mentioning things that she shouldn't have known about, like David's nickname, the type of car he drives, and some of the music he liked. I asked her how she knew him, and she proceeded to tell me stories about how he frequented their house a lot. She described a time when they walked in on him licking her chest and how she and Lisa stayed up late discussing how David was so desperate to be with Lisa that he even performed BJ on her to persuade her to have intimacy. I didn't want to believe it, but I started keeping track of everything she said. I observed things for months, and slowly everything started becoming clear. Learning about all this made me feel depressed, and I ended up drinking more than usual during her pregnancy. I hadn't confronted her about it yet, but it seemed like she could sense that something was about to blow up. I began asking vague questions and watched her squirm as she told lies. Then I'd witness one lie leading to another lie, trying to cover up the truth. She'd keep lying to me as if I had no clue. She'd look me right in the eyes and lie convincingly. My so-called best friend, who used to be quiet around me, couldn't even muster an apology when I confronted him. He just stayed silent, avoiding my gaze. As it turned out, he was the one feeding her information about my personal life that I had shared with him in confidence, all in an attempt to make her dislike me. The two people I trusted the most betrayed me, and the worst part is they both teamed up against me. Now, I'm stuck dealing with this overly apologetic woman who's raising my child. I'm also stuck with this lingering trauma that's made me reluctant to form new friendships or spend quality time with anyone because I fear getting hurt again by building connections. It's hard to trust people these days. I think the trauma has affected both of us. Because she cheated and lied to me repeatedly, it seems like she assumes I'm doing the same. Despite enduring all the pain and difficulties, I've remained completely faithful. Yet, I'm the one constantly on the defensive, facing groundless accusations. It seems like every other day, a new insecurity arises, and our arguments escalate to yelling, cursing, and slamming doors. My patience with her insecurities is wearing thin, and I've even reached a breaking point where I've cried, punched a wall, and injured my hand. I've never been aggressive before. I was shocked at how I lost control. I love my son deeply, and I can see that he's happiest when he sees his mom and me getting along. He's perceptive and knows when things are going well between us. There are days when I try to avoid unnecessary fights with her by going for a drive. But when I return, the baby seems upset and only wants his mom. It feels like if we split up, it'll definitely affect him. However, if we stay and keep arguing all the time, we'll just set a bad example for him. It's painful, even though I hate admitting it. She really pushed me to come clean before we decided to have a baby, but she never opened up herself. She never confessed that she was sneaking around.